this evening, and we will get going here in just a moment. We'll give everybody another minute to jump on, and our panelists here a moment to get geared up, and then we'll introduce the panel and start the session.
Dawn, I think the floor will be yours when you're ready to start.
Okay.
If you can get your video to work, go ahead and turn that on so folks can meet the panel a little bit, at least see some faces and names together.
Okay, excellent. I think we are finally officially ready to go.
Oh, Matt, you're sideways. That's an interesting take on things. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. We've looks like we have about 30 people joining us to learn more and share some feedback about the short-term rental regulation project that we're working on in Laramie County. I'm Leslie Ellis. I'm the Community Development Director here at the county, and I'll pass the baton over to Matt and Ton to introduce themselves. And Matt, you're muted and you're also upside down. There we go. All right. So go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Sorry about that, folks. Matt Lafferty, I'm a principal planner with the Long Range Planning section here at the Community Development Department, and I'm helping Ton and Leslie with this project. Thanks for joining us.
Well, and good evening, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. I am Ton Hillenbrand. I'm a senior planner here at Laramie County, and I am the planner that is managing the short-term rental regulations update. So again, thank you for your time, and we will get started. Hopefully. Okay. So the intent of today's webinar is to provide background information on short-term rental regulations, present ideas on what is being considered, and gather feedback and ideas from the community members and interested parties on short-term rental regulations. The information gathered today, along with feedback from the short-term rental questionnaire, community questionnaire, and next week's community open house in Estes Park, will help us determine what, if any, changes or revisions need to be made to the county's short-term rental regulations. If revisions are necessary, the intent is to build upon our existing short-term rental regulations, and we do not intend to reduce or eliminate the regulations altogether. And based upon the feedback we are hearing in the community does support some level of regulation. So please keep in mind that generally revisions or updates made to the short-term rental standards would not impact previously approved short-term rentals. In instances where revisions were made to the re-registration process or transferability could impact approved short-term rentals. Another note of importance is that Laramie County short-term rental regulations only apply to those properties located in unincorporated Laramie County. Therefore, any changes made to our regulations would not impact or change those regulations upheld by local municipalities. So for instance, changes to the county's regulations do not change those regulations, say in the city of Fort Collins or the town of Estes Park and what they implement or enforce. So before we dive into the background on short-term rental regulations and the process of updating the regulations, I would like to have everyone take a quick polling question. We understand that many of you may not be familiar with Zoom or webinars and how this works. So we do have just a practice question, if you will, a fun practice question. So Leslie has it up on the screen right now. So the question is, what is your favorite time of year in Colorado? So you should be able to, awesome. So it looks like we're getting some good feedback. So we'll give you a couple more seconds here. And then when Leslie's ready, I'll let her close it out. Cool. I would agree. It looks like fall and what we're seeing is coming up #1. It's a good time of year. Okay. So it looks like we got all the 34 participants in, so that's great. So we're now leading into the actual webinar poll. So where is your area of interest in the county? So this may be where you live generally, or if you own an STR or short-term rental, where is that property located? This just will give us a good idea as to where we're seeing participation. When we do get a little bit further into this webinar, when we open it up for comments, it gives us a good idea as to where those comments are coming from. Just a couple more seconds, it looks like. Okay. Excellent. Okay, thank you so much all for participating in that poll. We do appreciate it. Okay. So here on the screen, I'll just go ahead and have the webinar agenda and instructions for moving forward. So as you see, we are in the process between 6:05 and 6:20 of giving just a brief presentation on the background information on short-term rentals and the process and timeline. And then we're hopeful that after that presentation, we will do participant questions and feedback. So we'll open up the floor at that time to receive feedback from those of you who are joining us today. And then we'll just do a quick summary and closing around 7:25 with the hopes of closing out on time at 7:30. Just some general instructions before we dive in. So attendees are muted upon entry into the webinar and video is disabled. At the end of our presentation, we will provide an opportunity for comments and feedback, as I stated. And at that time, our team will ask you to use the raise hand control on the bottom of your screen if you wish to provide comments. And then if you wish to ask a question, you may use the Q&A control at the bottom of your screen. And we will make every effort to answer those questions at the end of the meeting if we have time, and we'll address that again here in just a bit. And then, of course, if you have an opportunity to speak, we do ask that you please maintain civility in that process. So to start, this will give us some information on short-term rentals. So the county understands that short-term rentals leads to advantages and challenges. While short-term rentals provide increased revenues and option for visitors and owners, communities are hearing increasing levels of complaints from neighbors about traffic and noise and growing concerns about commercial uses in residential neighborhoods. Also, Laramie County is learning more about safety issues from fire districts and neighbors, such as limited access and egress for properties during emergencies and higher levels of fire-related calls in short-term rentals. And finally, the demand for short-term rentals and conversion of long-term rentals and housing to short-term rentals appear to correlate with the loss of long-term rental options as well as workforce housing. Having administered the current short-term rental regulations for several years, the county recognizes the need to evaluate the effectiveness of those regulations. And the intent of this effort is to ensure that community concerns regarding neighborhood impacts are addressed while maintaining alignment with the ever-changing home sharing and rental industry. When considering the Community Development Department 2022 work plan, the Board of County Commissioners agreed that updating the short-term rental regulations countywide, including the Estes Valley, was a priority. So the county started the process to revisit and update existing short-term rental regulations in the land use code at the beginning of July with the publication of a community questionnaire and short-term rental regulation update project page. We are still in the very early stages of the process, and we suspect that the overall process will take about 8 to 9 months to complete. The community questionnaire, if you are unfamiliar, does close on August 28th, and we do encourage you to participate if you haven't already. It's a great opportunity to provide your feedback, and we definitely will take those all into consideration through this process. So the next steps, as you see on the screen, through September and October, we will develop a first draft of revision options. So there'll be a variety of options to present then to the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners for their feedback. And then from there into the late fall, we'll, based upon that feedback and the feedback we gather from the community, we'll do draft regulations. And those then, of course, we will gather additional community feedback through additional open houses such as this. And details of those dates or what have you will be posted on our project website
Tom, I'm going to interject just really quickly too, because I think this probably should be pointed out, but during September and October, there will be opportunities for public input as well as Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. So sorry to interrupt, but just so that everybody knows that.
Thank you. Okay. And then final draft and adoption of the proposed regulations will likely take some place at some point early of 2023 next year. Preliminary feedback from the questionnaire thus far suggests that the community may support continuing some level of regulations, modifying the approval process, creating a cap on the number of approved short-term rentals countywide, and that's outside of the Estes Valley, and then allowing more than one short-term rental on commercially zoned properties or property zone accommodation in the Estes Valley, and considering some limitation to the transferability of a short-term rental approval to a new property owner. So following this brief presentation on short-term rentals, we will ask for you to provide comment as I stated. So with that in mind, as we move through the presentation, we would like you to consider the following question. Do you think Laramie County is regulating and reviewing short-term rentals at the right level? And ideas to consider, should the regulations remain unchanged? If not, what could be modified, added, or improved? And the three key topics to consider is, the review process changed or improved? Should density limitations creating caps on the number of approved short-term rentals countywide, and transferability of approval to new owners? Just food for thought as we move along. So to start, the following slides provide background information on short-term rentals and existing regulations. So what is a short-term rental, or STR as we call them for short? A short-term rental, as currently defined by our Laramie County Land Use Code, is defined as a dwelling rented to transient guests for 30 or fewer consecutive days when not occupied by the owner or renter. And this may be referred to as a vacation home in the Estes Valley. Other definitions of consideration include a bed and breakfast, and this is defined as an owner or operator occupied dwelling where lodging rooms are provided to transient guests for 30 or fewer consecutive days. And in other words, the property owner is present on site with the guests. And then a resort lodge or resort cottage is defined as a building or group of buildings under single management and ownership, and it's containing rooms or units available for temporary rental to transient guests, which serves as a destination point for visitors and where the primary attraction is major recreational features or activities for persons on vacation. And in the Estes Valley, this is referred to a resort lodge cabin rather than resort lodge cottage. And then during this process, we may also look more closely at the bed and breakfast and resort lodge cabin cottage definitions and regulations. So does the county currently regulate short-term rentals? Of course, that's why we are here today. Laramie County short-term rental regulations and the Laramie County Land Use Code went into effect September 1st of 2019. And then adopted in 2017, the Estes Valley area short-term rental regulations for vacation homes predate the countywide short-term rental standards and include a cap on total number of such uses allowed within the residential zoned areas of the valley. A wait list was established in 2018 for applicants beyond the cap still existing today. And then where can short-term rentals be located? Short-term rentals are allowed in certain zone districts in the county. If a property is located within one of the zone districts that allow for the use, the property owner can seek approval to convert their residence to a short-term rental. So on the screen, you'll see that we provided a list of those zoning districts that allow short-term rentals, both for countywide and in the Estes Valley. And the next slides, I will go into our actual zoning maps. And I won't spend, for the sake of time, I won't spend too much time on these maps, but they will be made available online by the end of next week on our project website for short-term rental update. You will be able to find a PDF copy of these maps, so if you do want to look at them closer. So this one here is just overall general, and again, it's such a large county, it's hard to read, but they will be available. And then the following slide is the Estes Valley showing those zone districts. And these maps are specific. We've narrowed them down to just the zone districts that allow short-term rentals and eliminated those that do not. So how does a property owner turn their home into a short-term rental? In order for a property to be rented as a short-term rental, the property owner is required to seek approval for the use through the Laramie County Community Development Department, specifically through the administrative special review process. And that is the process noted here on the screen. To proceed with the approval process, the property owner would be required to submit a land use application, including an application fee, and provide evidence that the property can and will meet the requirements for short-term rentals as listed in the Laramie County Land Use Code. With the administrative special review approval process, the decision to approve or deny an application is issued by the community development director unless there is an appeal to a standard or if significant neighborhood opposition occurs, at which point it goes to the Board of County Commissioners for a public hearing. The county requires notice to neighbors, referral agency review, and compliance with all the criteria in the land use code. And an enforcement ordinance was adopted in December of 2021. The enforcement ordinance, HB-20-1093, granted counties authority to approve and regulate short-term rentals. The ordinance states that it is unlawful to lease, advertise, or permit the leasing of a short-term rental without required approvals, and it requires property management to be available 24/7 to respond to complaints. Upon approval, it requires neighbor notification within 500 feet of the subject property of property management contact information and advertising to contain valid Laramie County approval number, which is essentially a project number we assign to an application. And then the rental activities are required to cease until determination or an approval is made by the planning director. The Laramie County Code Compliance Division assists property owners in bringing their properties into compliance with the adopted land use and building codes, regulation, and ordinances, including Ordinance HB 20-93. The community can report concerns and complaints related to short-term rentals to the Code Compliance Division online, and that link is provided on the screen. And of course, if you have questions about that, we can address those later. And as noted previously, having administered the current short-term rental regulations for several years, the county recognizes the need to evaluate the effectiveness of those short-term rental regulations. So following conversations with the Laramie County Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners, some topics of consideration include, for areas located outside Estes Valley, should there be a cap or limit on the number of allowed short-term rentals based upon neighborhood or zone district? Such that a neighborhood located close to a city could have a different cap than, say, a neighborhood located in the mountains, or such that an approved short-term rental could not be located within a certain distance to, say, another short-term rental. Should the county limit the transferability of a short-term rental approval when the property is sold to a new owner? And should the county modify the approval process? So this would be, may be modified so that residentially zoned properties would have a different approval process than, say, commercially zoned properties, or an approval process could be based upon the number of days per year the short-term rental is rented to transient guests. Again, these are only some of the topics under consideration, and there are many more questions on the questionnaire to gather feedback. And we understand that a one-size-fits-all approach may not work, and different standards may apply to different parts of the county, similar to what we currently see for short-term rental regulations in the Estes Valley. So during this process, and considering where approvals for short-term rentals are located, we have started mapping the location of existing short-term rentals countywide and in the Estes Valley. So again, these maps, along with other analysis, will help us better understand where caps or limits may be developed if that is the direction the county ends up taking. Such as the previous maps we looked at of the zoning districts. I won't spend a significant amount of time on these maps, but they will be made available by the end of next week. So if you'd like to look at them closer, they will be online. And these ones specifically, these are what we are calling our density maps, or where short-term rentals are located that have been previously approved. And they are a work in progress, and these are drafts. So this one shows overall, and as of right now, we understand they are a bit hard to read, but we are making modifications and hope to have those done by end of next week. So once we post them. So this is zooming in a little bit closer to that map on the previous page. So you'll see the left-hand side, this is more of the front range, and you'll note the dots. And these are the dots that of importance are showing approved short-term rentals within the county. So certain dots are associated with certain approvals. And then the second map here zoomed in would be the Red Feather Lakes area. So you do see again some of those maps. And then we have the Estes Valley panned out. And then coming in a bit closer, you again start to see some of the dots that represent previously approved short-term rentals. So this will give us an idea of where we're seeing it may be densities, where the common places we are seeing these requests. And this will become very handy as we move through the process. So to bring us back to our presentation, to wrap things up, we return to the slide that we showed you previously at the beginning of all this. So again, do you think Laramie County is regulating and reviewing short-term rentals at the right level? Should the regulations remain unchanged? If not, what could be modified, added, or improved? And then the three key topics that we did cover here just briefly was the review process changed or improved? Should density limitations creating caps on the number of approved short-term rentals countywide be considered, and transferability of approval to new owners? So at this time, we will open the webinar for our participant comment and feedback regarding short-term rentals, and we very much value the feedback you are providing. I will hand it over to Matt, and he will give more direction on how we will approach this.
Thanks. Awesome. Go ahead.
Ton and Matt, I was going to say we have a few questions that are showing up here. What we can do is continue to collect questions and maybe answer. Some of them are easy to answer here in the chat, and then others might be a little bit more involved. So we'll keep gathering questions too, and maybe answer some of those in the with a typed answer for folks who are providing questions.
Good. Yeah, I was watching some of those too, and was going to make a comment that really tonight is to listen to Ton's presentation, which she did an awesome job on. Thank you for that, Ton. Secondly, is to take the time to listen to you all. We have 48 participants. It looks like we have a little over an hour left to this presentation or to this webinar tonight. And so if you want to make a comment and provide us your thoughts, please raise your hand and we will take people in the order that they come up. And go ahead and raise your hands now if you think you're going to talk, so we can gauge how much time to give each one of you for tonight's meeting. The questions that are coming up, we will try to answer before the end of tonight's proceedings. If not, we will provide a written response to those and post them on the webpage probably tomorrow. There was a question earlier that will this recording be made available so that people not available to attend tonight can see the presentation? The answer is yes. We will take the recording and we'll put it on our website tomorrow. And you can invite people to come in and watch the presentation there. So it looks like right now we have about 7 or 8 people that wish to make comment. We got an hour. Given the number of people that are willing to make comments at this point, I'm going to go ahead and allow 2 minutes for each person to make a comment. And then if that goes well, sorry, I just lost all my panelists. Then we can, if people want to talk a little bit longer, we can allow that. So I'm gonna go ahead and let 3 minutes go. Ton, are you okay with the timer on that? 3 minutes. Okay, so Ton's gonna put up a timer. When you hear it go off, your time's up, and if we have time to come back, we will. So we're gonna start. I'm gonna read off a couple of names, and we'll take you in the order that comes up. When I call your name, I will ask you to unmute, and you will give 3 minutes to voice your opinion. We're going to start with Joanne, and then we're going to follow that by Stacy Bernard, and then Teresa Clashine. Sorry if I brutalize people's names. Joanne, you are now allowed to unmute and speak.
Hi, yes, thank you. There seems to be a breakdown in communication between the code compliance officer and the sheriff's department. So some of the neighbors in my neighborhood participated in a webinar a few weeks ago, and it was thought that the sheriff's department had not gone to short-term vacation rentals in our area, and many neighbors had said yes, they had. And when I contacted the sheriff's department, we were told that we needed to pay $750 per address and have specific dates. So, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, the code compliance officer isn't there. If you call the sheriff's office and the sheriff's office doesn't have a communication with the code compliance officer, how do we know three, infractions and the short-term vacation rental license is disqualified? So I'm just wondering about that communication between the two Larimer County offices. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, and we'll take a look at that and see if we can improve upon that. Okay, moving on. And when you're done, I'm going to unraise your hands. So Stacy Bernard, you are now allowed to speak. And on deck is Teresa Glasheen, followed by William Brown.
All right, thank you so much. I wanted to make a comment. I do believe working with Larimer County, it is at the right level of communication and investigation. We had a situation where we were looking at a potential bed and breakfast in our community, and the communication with the county was very good and very quick, and they kept us informed. My recommendations would be that transferability not be allowed when a property is sold. I mean, it's a new owner. I just think it should not be able to be transferred. And then on the short-term rental, I believe it should not be extended past the 30 days. I've heard some communications that there's been talk that there's been some requests to increase it to 42 days. I think 30 days is more than enough. And my last suggestion would be that they are short-term rentals, be it B&B or be it a cottage, that they are all in the same pool, and the numbers are limited.
Very good. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Teresa Glasheen, you are now free to speak. Stacy, you are on deck. Or William Brown, you're on deck. And Eric Richards, you are after William. Teresa.
Hi, Matthew, just if you could make a brief announcement. People, when we unmute, you guys send us a link to do that, because I was just looking for a way to unmute. So when you give us our turn, you send the link to unmute. So I just wanted to throw that out there, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, so does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everybody for doing this. I know that in my community, in my neighborhood, that short-term rentals have, been a large discussion because we live in a very rural residential area. And we do have a lot of the concerns that Tawn talked about regarding fire and evacuations, and the understanding of, people that are, it's not just, if you're talking people rent out, their places 30 times a year. That's a lot of people that come into your community. One of the, I don't know if it's a question or a statement that I'd like to make is, when I received information from the county regarding a short-term rental proposal, and I started talking to a lot of my neighbors. Some of the people in the neighborhood did not receive the postcard. So one of the suggestions that I have, considering short-term rentals don't just affect the people, in the very close areas, but neighborhoods, again, especially in very tight-knit rural areas, that the radius, or I don't know how people are determined to get the postcards, but that I think that, the amount of people that are notified to these short-term rentals, that radius should be increased so that more people in the community know. That's just, a suggestion. Again, short-term rentals, they can have, good qualities and they could have bad qualities. And again, in a very tight-knit rural area, you worry about crime increasing and things like that, that I think more people should be aware and should have a say whether or not, or, be able to reach out to the planning department. Other than that, I really just wanted to say that my experience with the planning department has been wonderful. I send an email, I get an email back. I don't even think it takes, 2 or 3 hours. Questions are answered. If I'm not sure of the answer, there's more time taken, maybe even a phone conversation. So I do appreciate everything that you guys are doing to look at the I do think that there needs to be a little bit more strict standards, not just by zoning, but also looking at, the other parts of the area that the short-term rentals want to come up. Thank you, Tawn. I'm sorry.
You're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments, Teresa. And we'll look into those things, and feel free to everybody to make sure that you get online and take our online questionnaire to make sure that we all get your comments and things that you think should be addressed and changed so that we are addressing them all. Next.
And to that, Matt, just real quick, we will, once we do our wrap up, I will share a screen that will provide a link to our project page that has this information as well as the questionnaire. And then I'll reshare those QR codes as well.
Okay, so we got 4 more people that want to speak. William Brown, you're up next. Eric Richards is to follow, and Terry King will be up after that. You should have just got an invite to speak, William Brown.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, I guess. I want to mention I am not a short-term rental owner or manager or in any way involved with the business. I do have my 2 nearest neighbors are short-term rentals, and we've not had any particular problem in the 2 years we've lived here. And I think these short-term rentals, it seems like people are attacking them without regard, simply because they're easy to attack. Sometimes they're non-resident owners. It just seems to me like they're made out to be worse than they generally are, and that we need to make some sort of statistical analysis of complaints in short-term rentals compared to other properties to see whether it really is more of a problem or it's a perception problem. There are also some incredible benefits to the community. In the Estes Valley, 40% of the lodging tax is coming from short-term rentals. It creates a lot of jobs, a lot of economic development, and it's an important part of our lodging stock for our visitors that if we limit it, we're going to have unintended consequences for that have to be considered. The other thing is, I think they're misunderstood as to what they really are. That, the idea that they're commercial ventures, in my mind, is erroneous. What in most cases, in a vast majority of the cases, they're simply being used by someone who wants to buy a house up in the Estes Valley, can't afford to do so without some short-term rental income to enable them to do that. And it's just not. There are very few that have more than one vacation rental, very few owners. There are some, but those are mainly vacation rentals that are self-managed. And, the reason I'm saying that they're using them to buy their house up here, 40% of our residents are over 65 in the Estes Valley. And meanwhile, there's no long-term rental regulation at all, from what Leslie just told me in response to my answer. And a lot of the problems that happen with any rentals or any residential property are common to long-term and short-term rentals. Noise issues, parking, issues like that are not unique in any way, shape, or form to short-term rentals, and to regulate short-term rentals more than long-term rentals is simply unfair to property owners. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We appreciate your comments. Just a quick comment, because we are talking about Larimer County and the unincorporated portions of Larimer County. So the Estes Valley, there is portions of places that are in the town, and those places are under the town's regulations. And I want to bring that up because you mentioned a lodging tax, and the town is allowed to apply a lodging tax. The county currently doesn't. So we're not allowed to apply a lodging tax. So short-term rentals outside of the Estes Valley or the Estes area properly do not pay a lodging tax. Moving on, Eric Richards, you're allowed to speak. Tara King, you're to follow him. And Rich, I think it's Chai-Pei, is allowed to follow her. Eric?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate this meeting, and you're taking the time to do it on hours that are better for us. I'm concerned about miscommunication between those of us who live here in the neighborhood and what's going on in the paperwork that's filed with the county and the paperwork that's being passed around as handouts in the neighborhood. I've lived here since April 2001, so 21 years. And I am very, very concerned about the high density, 25 overnight guests and an unlimited number of daytime guests that are going to be up here. I'm worried about our safety, emergency egress, as you have covered, and also what we're being told, what's going up on the Facebook page, and what's happening in the public filings. They're all different, and I wish we could get that together. I have a screen cap that I took of the Pinewood Lake Lodge Facebook group that talked about wedding receptions and corporate retreats. This is not a bed and breakfast. This is something entirely different from a bed and breakfast. And I'm very concerned that it is being passed off as a bed and breakfast equivalent. Well, it's not. And I am very much concerned about neighbors who are not used to living here, interfering with the animals, interfering with the safety, dropping a cigarette, dropping an apple core, which would attract a bear, any number of fire and crowd mitigation problems, noise control, all these issues. I live less than 100 yards from the house, and I am very, very concerned about what this is going to do to our neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Eric, thank you very much. Please provide us your comments regarding that application in writing, and so that we have them available to evaluate as we process that application. Terry King, followed by Rich, I think it's Chai-Pei, and then either Jeff or Janine McKinn. Terry, you're allowed to speak now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate you taking the time to have this Zoom meeting and listening to the comments of everyone. I have, I don't know if I'd say enjoyed, but appreciated the comments that have been said here, especially Williams just a few minutes ago. I am my uncle and aunt were the original owners of my short-term rental that was built in 1930s. My uncle was actually the mayor of Estes Park at the time. And my family has kept this home for, over the decades and generations. And as far as I do short-term rentals on it, I have a certificate and I take it really seriously. And For example, to respond to the last person's comments, I don't have a barbecue. I don't allow smoking in my anything in my short-term rental. I have the abilities to make sure that that is adhered to. And if I do see somebody smoking within my premise, that I address it immediately and they are politely asked to leave. So there are responsible short-term rental owners, and there are mechanisms within the various platforms. I particularly use Airbnb to monitor that. Like as far as parties, I have a special sound machine that Airbnb provided to me as a host that monitors the sound levels of my premise to make sure that there are no parties. Or I take a lot of responsibility and pride knowing, and I communicate with my neighbors. They know my number and they've all gotten their little postcard and everything they're supposed to do. But I don't leave it at that. I make sure that my neighbors, if they have a problem with one of my guests, that they contact me directly and I take care of it. And it's some extra work, but it also allows me and my family to, because of the extra income that we get, we are able to, continue to have this home up there that has been in our family for generations. And then I will be passing it down to my son. And as far as going through the my comments about whether the certificate should go along with the home, if the day ever comes, I don't think it would be in our situation that it would come. But I worked really hard to adhere to the regulations of the town of Estes Park to make sure that my property had the life safety checks, and I had to do some modifications that were pretty costly to me. But I made sure that all that was done.
3 minutes is up.
Okay, I'm in compliance. And so I think that certificate should go, if I ever chose to sell the property, it should go with the sale of the transaction of that property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry. Next to speak is Richard Chape, followed by Jeff or Janine McGinn, and then Jeffrey Shegeman. Boy, I just lost, looked like somebody just locked off. So Jeff or Janine, you are allowed to speak.
Hi, this is Janine McGinn, and I'm also grateful that you are having this hearing and will continue to do so, or a meeting to get input from the various interests of short-term rentals. Our situation is that we are in the greater Estes area. We do pay a 2% lodging tax to Estes Park. And I know on the questionnaire, it asked if the county maybe should implement a lodging tax. Well, I think that would be fine, actually. It might help, for enforcement, or if there's other issues regarding them. But we already pay one to Estes. So I'm not, you had mentioned that, but it was also in the questionnaire if Laramie County should do one. And I don't think people should be doubly charged for that. Transferability, we think, just like the previous person said, we have gone through Estes Park, then it was transferred to the county where there were more stringent requirements on plats and safety requirements, which we have done from the beginning. So that's never been an issue for us. That's utmost important to us. We have few neighbors, and they continually say that we have like the best renters, and we've done this for 14 years. We've never had a complaint. We limit ours, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, to 6 people. We don't do the extra to 8, which would be allowed. We just feel it's too much for our place. And everyone has to remember that Estes Park is a tourist town. And the businesses and the community rely so much on tourist income and taxes. So I think that if someone desperately wants to not be involved in the tourism of Estes, there are subdivision or areas in Estes that by virtue of their covenants or their HOA, they do not allow them, and you won't see them there. So I think there's options for those people that just don't want to be around them. Another question that was either directly asked or alluded to was, should you monitor those STRs that have like large STRs more so, or have more stringent requirements? Those seem to be the ones that cause the most problems for people, is when there are weddings and parties, which we, by the way, do not allow either, and they'll be kicked out if our camera shows it. But the larger ones seems to be the ones that seem to cause problems for people. Not that a few people in one couldn't, but in our case, it really has not. And we have a couple neighbors that I think would be pretty picky about things. And she just says they are always the most respectful people.
3
Their
minutes is up.
families, okay, their families. And just to finish up, you know, this is a retirement income for us. We use it. It allows us to be able to come to Estes. We lived in Windsor and Northern Colorado and Estes for many, many years. And if you do limit the number, I think you should at least grandfather those that have, you know, been good STRs or responsible STRs. And if you have new owners, I'll just quit this. It should be transferable, I believe, because we work so hard. But if they fill out new forms that are the, you know, or maybe they get a reinspection,
Okay.
but that should not be denied.
All
We
right.
work too hard for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Thank you. Rich, it looked like you were allowed to talk earlier and you fell off and you're back on. So I'm going to let you now talk. So Rich, if you would unmute yourself.
Yep, you can hear me okay. It is Chappy, rhymes with happy.
Okay.
I live in unincorporated Larimer County, just outside of Estes Valley. And I am the 4th continuous owner of a vacation rental management business exclusively for our neighborhood. Our neighborhood's called Windcliff Estates. It was actually established in the 70s as a neighborhood that was built on the ability for homeowners to immediately, whenever they choose, rent their homes for short-term rentals. Our first rental was in 1970. So for 53 years, all 150 plus property owners in Windcliff have enjoyed the right to either opt in or opt out of our on-site professional vacation rental management service. And so it contrasts deeply with a lot of other neighborhoods. I think, you know, I definitely sympathize with comments from folks like Eric, because that's different. You know, he's got a different situation. I also look at what's going on in the Estes Valley, and there's some places where I too would be concerned about maybe the proliferation of short-term rentals in, say, neighborhoods that are traditionally for workforce and were traditionally affordable. Windcliff's never been affordable. The whole reason the developer kind of pitched the lot buyers on letting him rent their houses when they were constructed for short-term rentals was even doctors and lawyers at the time could hardly afford the dirt. And so it was a way to offset the costs and make it more palatable for the developer to sell lots and develop Windcliff. And so for 53 years, we actually codified the behavior of the vacation rentals in our neighborhood in our HOA covenants. So there's rules like Janine just mentioned too. We don't allow smoking anywhere in the neighborhood. We don't allow weddings. We don't allow big parties. We have between 800 and 1,000 different reservations every year along the 40 houses that have licenses and are licensed vacation rentals in my program. And we've had 0 complaints because my office sits 100 yards away from my house in Windcliff. And we check in every renter. We vet every renter. We hand them brass keys to houses. We don't allow them just to go in and try codes. These aren't done on the internet without face-to-face. Long story short is, this has worked really well for 53 years because our neighborhood self-regulates, if you will, our on-site professional rental management system here in Windcliff. So it is our greater concern that the rules applied to some don't apply to all, and that the county just finds some way of allowing neighborhoods that do permit and codify behavior of vacation rentals, short-term rentals, to go ahead and conduct those.
3 minutes is up.
Yeah, I see it. And obviously, in so doing would allow us to transfer those when that house gets sold. Thanks, guys, and good job, Ton.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Chappie, I like that. All right, Jeffrey Shagaman, followed by Catherine Jamison, and then Donna Chappell.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. So first of all, I'd like to echo basically what Mr. Mr. Happy, I'd like to say, said, and then the McGinn said earlier. I'm kind of in that area because, well, I own a home in Estes Park. It's part of the city. It's in a very small neighborhood. And the only thing that I'm absolutely all for, the Airbnb approach, the method, and to really enhance not only the income for those that are involved in that, but also for the city itself. My family's been in Estes Park for a long time, and I have a generational house as well. And so my main point is, if it's just going to be a rental just for it's a short period of time or reasonable amount of time versus something that's more commercial, right? Like an Airbnb. I mean, sorry, like a bed and breakfast, right? Or some sort of scaled down motel situation. That is something that I am against. And it sounds like some of the homeowners and business owners that we just heard from are also against, right? Once you pass a certain critical mass of people, things become a little bit more untenable. And certainly for a small neighborhood like the one that my place is in, I completely agree. So my point is that yes, absolutely. If you've got your house, you're renting it out to people, and you're very responsible host for that situation. Fantastic, and yes, let's do all we can to promote that property as well as whatever other property you might have, and absolutely help the economy of Estes Park. But when you start going beyond sort of what's tenable in a particular neighborhood, things are get a little bit messy. And so I guess my point at the end of all of this is that that I'd not be on board at all with having bed and breakfast types of establishments in my neighborhood. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Catherine Jamison, followed by Donna Chappell. Catherine, you're free to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate having the floor for a second. And my question is just really a general question of short-term rental versus long-term rental, because I've had quite a few clients who have not understood, and I don't know how to explain it to them, why, if you rent your house for more than 30 days, there are no regulations. Nobody checks on anything. But if it's less than 30 days, you have to have the life safety inspection and all that. Why does it not matter if it's long-term, but it does matter if it's short-term?
Thanks. We'll attempt to answer your question throughout the process. But basically, a long-term rental is just considered a single-family dwelling and not a rental situation of any difference than an owner owning a piece of property.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna, you are now allowed to speak.
Hi, thanks for your time here this evening. My question is, can there be a greater emphasis during the review process on the character of the area or subdivision involved? Not all communities have covenants that can protect those that live there, especially in a very quiet community. Can you also provide a thorough consideration of the infrastructure, such as septic versus sewer, roads, potential fire danger, such as how wooded is the area, noise, how quiet is the area, dark sky rules, wildlife. I also agree that transferability not be allowed. A seller who has been a very responsible renter may not be followed by a buyer who is as responsible. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Donna. Catherine Jameson, you, hold on, I'm trying to move over there. You're allowed to speak.
Matt, Catherine spoke previously.
Yeah, I already
Okay.
did. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
I just didn't want to skip you. Okay, that's everybody that signed up to speak. If anybody else wants to add to this, oh, very good. Margaret McCrary, you are, I lost you. You're now free to speak, Margaret.
Hello, I thank you for having the hearing. I am in a home that is in unincorporated Laramie County. I'm born and raised in Laramie County, moved away for a while and am back. I am concerned that a home that we purchased with the intent of living here is going to be labeled commercial, because it's far from that. I think that the regulation should make distinctions between people who are renting their home that they primarily live in and maybe renting it out with guests, knowing that they'll be staying with the host or for short periods of time while the hosts are on vacation. So I answered some of the survey questions, but I'm very concerned that folks such as myself, retirement age, we're seeking to continue to live in a beautiful part of the country that we know intimately will not be able to sustain themselves without the ability to make some income. The commercial tax rating seems to me to be ludicrous. It's a very different status than, perhaps there should be a lodging tax, but not coupled on top of that, a commercial labeling a short-term rental that's primarily a residence as a commercial enterprise. The second thing, and I apologize, I wasn't able to access on my phone till I got home to my computer, but I am concerned about there being a lack of affordable housing for the temporary workers that are common in Estes. And I seriously hope that the county commissioners and the planning department can think through how that burden should be shifted to some of the larger employers. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Lisa DeForge, you are now allowed to speak.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate you all taking a look at this and also asking for feedback. I do think the review process needs to be scrutinized. And I also ask the county to please carefully consider the abnormal, unusually large STRs. Other speakers have talked about this too, that they seem to be more troublesome for neighborhoods, especially very quiet ones. They just don't fit in there in the residential neighborhoods that are very quiet, and they can change that neighborhood forever, and how many would come after that kind of thing. So yeah, considering what's tenable in a particular neighborhood, because not all situations are the same regarding this. So, but I just want to thank you again for taking a look at this.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate your comments. Well, that looks to be about everybody that raised their hand to speak. We'll keep an eye on that, but I think given the fact that we now have about 25 minutes left in this presentation, that we can go ahead and we can answer some of the questions that came up in our question and answer segment. So I'll read off the question